Clay, you've certainly seen the strange things that you mentioned the EA Sports, which is a big video game maker, kicking off the Russian teams from their soccer game. This is a video game, right?
Really strange.
And vodka that's Russian being poured out the drain. We're having a freedom fries moment of moral panic right now over this. The West knows Putin is the aggressor. He's a bad guy. We all have clarity on that. We have to watch very closely at what's going on here, though, and how we can mitigate this, how we can limit this to the degree we can as outsiders and not get drawn further into it. That's the big, bright red line we have. But you can see there's already an effort to use the political narrative here of good versus evil in Ukraine in ways that should be very concerning to us back here at home. Joe Biden was speaking yesterday. This is right after the State of the Union address where, did you feel unified? I did not feel the country was unified after the State of the Union address.
No, I would agree with you. I don't think very many people out there at all felt unified. And by the way, I want to hear this clip, but can we just point out, Monday, mask outdoors for Joe Biden as he walked across the White House grounds. Tuesday, no mask at the State of the Union. Wednesday, Milwaukee to go try to sell the State of the Union, mask again. I mean, this is so transparently ridiculous, not even analyzing what he's saying, but the mask Olympics, the mask oppression, whatever you want to call it, is beyond absurd.
Democrat politicians have essentially turned the mask into flag pins. Remember when people would say, and early on in the Iraq War also, there's a lot of people are wearing flag pins. Are they not wearing? Where's your flag pin? Masking for them is not a sign of patriotism. It's a sign of adherence to the science, whatever that actually means. Or they're suffering from an actual mental health disorder. I mean, somebody who thinks that one day a mask is good, the next day it's bad, the next day it's good.
It's so crazy.
This is entirely irrational. But while that's all going on, you need to remember, Joe Biden just pretended to be the president for all Americans earlier in the week and did the whole rah-rah State of the Union address thing. Here he is. Just yesterday, I think he was up in Wisconsin.
Milwaukee, I believe.
Yeah, it was Milwaukee.
By the way, we're also number one. We're number one in Houston, enjoying ourselves. You went up to Milwaukee recently. Fantastic people there.
Absolutely. Appreciate all of you listening on WISN. And here is what I was going to say Putin said. Pardon me. Here is what Biden said about the invasion. You've got to hear this, folks. The invasion of Ukraine. I mean, what really led up to this? Play clip 1.
Vladimir Putin was counting on being able to split up the United States. Look, how would you feel if you saw crowds storm and break down the doors of the British Parliament, kill 5 cops, injure 145, or the German Bundestag, or the Italian Parliament? I think you'd wonder.
Clay, he is equating. First of all, he's lying about 5 cops being killed again.
1,000,000,000% lying.
He just won't stop. They keep saying this. People committing suicide months after a riot is not the same thing as dying from being beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. The riot was what they said. But put aside that lie for a second. The even bigger lie, in a sense, is that Putin went into Ukraine, according to this assessment from our current commander-in-chief, because of the threat to democracy and the divisions created here at home from January 6th. You have Biden straight up implying that the war in Ukraine is the fault of people walking into the Capitol building, many of whom were just taking selfies and trespassing on federal property during a official proceeding. This is crazy.
It's beyond crazy. First of all, it should be flagged as a huge lie, because claiming that January 6th, 5 people got killed who were police officers is a flagrant lie. But what's also crazy about this, Buck, is Biden didn't mention January 6th in his entire State of the Union address. He talked for 62 minutes to the entire nation in an address that they probably drafted, what do you think, 20 times, 30 times before it was finished? They made a calculated decision, we're not going to mention January 6th. And then he immediately goes on the road to try to sell the speech that he just gave in the State of the Union and decides to make this outlandish of a claim. If he truly believed this, why wasn't it in the State of the Union? And what sort of political calculus is going on that he's falsely trying to appeal to a big audience, right? Maybe when he thinks Republicans and independents are paying attention in the State of the Union. And then when he's back to selling red meat to the far left-wing elements of his party, he's selling this. I also wonder, Buck, when I hear this, were they so attacked by members of their own party privately for not mentioning January 6th that Biden felt like he had to kneel at the altar of the left wing of his party and immediately basically apologize and come out and go farther left than, frankly, I ever remember him going as it pertains to directly blaming 5 different people who are police officers supposedly dying in this January 6th event. I thought, Buck, and I probably bet you did as well, that he would try and tie Ukraine into January 6th, but I thought he would do it in his State of the Union address. I wonder if that got the cutting room floor at the last minute, and then the Biden White House had such blowback of a negative direction after the State of the Union that they immediately told him, hey, let's put this back that we cut out of the State of the Union into this Milwaukee for the red meat for the left-wingers.
And here's why I think you have to pay close attention to this. You can't just say, well, this is Joe Biden being the reckless demagogue that he always is. We are seeing now in this era of COVID and the pandemic, and also leading into that, I would argue, 4 years of the Russia, Putin stole the 2016 election for Trump hysteria. But hysteria as a tool of political mobilization is being used all around us in the West, in America. Look what just happened in Canada.
Yeah.
You had Justin Trudeau invoke effectively a National Security Act, which is pretty close to martial law, the Emergencies Act there, which is only supposed to be if there's a threat to the integrity and security of the overall nation, because people parked their trucks in downtown Ottawa and had cookouts on the street. But he thought they were neo-Nazis, and he lied about them, and he undermined them in the public as much as possible with those lies. We're seeing the usage of tools now that will be used against us here. And I think that's why it's so concerning. When you have all these things being done against Russians abroad, I'm not talking about even what's going on in Ukraine. They're saying we should seize the assets of people who think of themselves as wise, Clay, and think that they're brilliant about how to deal with this, want us to punish the children of wealthy Russians who are in America. You're seeing this talked about. We should seize their yachts, seize their cars, keep them out of Harvard or whatever. Based on what? What is the legal principle for that? Some of them aren't even in Russia. I mean, you're just going to... Now, that hasn't happened yet, but you can see the overreaction from the perspective of a moral hysteria that means that people have to do all these things. We're all going to do everything we can. We're going to forget about principles. We're going to forget about rule of law and constitutional precedent and constitutional protection. People don't think that's going to be used against us here to suppress dissent, too. You've seen it in Canada. You're seeing... I'm not talking, again, about inside Ukraine. We'll get into that in a second. I'm talking about what they want to do to Russians all over the world, including here in America. We're in a moment of hysteria right now. People need to slow down. Take a breath.
This is the challenge in general of social media, because everybody feels the need to one-up the next person. And the moral indignation meter, the outrage meter, as I would put it, is constantly in need of being accelerated, of being advanced. And so there's a moral panic, and I've seen this for a long time, in terms of who can be the most outraged by something, right? And sometimes that can initially be very positive, because I do think the overall outreach of the democratic process to try to stand up against Russia has been very powerful and positive. But at some point, you tip over into the hysteria realm. And, I mean, I just think it's kind of outlandish. You mentioned it a moment ago, but sports is often an interesting window into this outrage meter. Does it really make sense for EA Sports to pull Russian soccer teams off of their FIFA video game? I mean, does it really make sense that your 15 and 16-year-old kids or grandkids who might play FIFA and might have a game where they're playing occasionally against a Russian team, that they shouldn't be able to do that? And this, by the way, the flip side of this is same thing when they put Colin Kaepernick in Madden, right? He's a quarterback in Madden right now, even though he's been out of the league for years, and they rated him inside of Madden, where the quality of the player supposedly matters so much, as better than many starting quarterbacks in the NFL. It's nonsensical. And to your point, Buck, there is an element of hysteria that I believe is manifestly more advanced because of social media than it ever was in the past. And sometimes that can be good, but it rapidly gets out of control and spirals into absurdity.
Rules for Radicals, Clay. Saul Alinsky. This is from Rules for Radicals. You want to know how the left thinks? It is essentially their handbook. Once you organize people around something as commonly agreed upon as pollution, then an organized people is on the move. From there, it's a short and natural step to political pollution, to Pentagon pollution, and then to whatever else you want. So you get everybody with all this indignation about Russia, which is agreed upon.
Yep.
But once the people are mobilized, now you have people that feel activated, energized, and they want something. They want to feel like they have power. They have some way of affecting the outcome. And what concerns me is we're in a time, we're coming out of the pandemic now. People are finally, I think, starting to realize what's gone on here. And there's a trauma from there's really a post-pandemic syndrome that we're all suffering from here in America and places all over the world. But in this elevated time of anxiety, hysteria, when you're talking about a military conflict going on overseas, where one power has thousands of nuclear weapons, or over 1,000 nuclear weapons, whatever the official number is, Clay, we all need to be very cautious about how fast we are pushed into believing a certain narrative, into accepting a certain pathway forward, because I think the elites are rattled. I think people are over anxious. And I think the Biden administration is desperate for a narrative of this is why we should be in charge.
I think that's well said. I would also point out that this directly undercuts what has been a moment of unity. Most people in America, Democrat, Republican, Independent, are united in believing that Russia should be stood up to for invading Ukraine. When you're Joe Biden and you go to Olympia, Wisconsin, by the way, I believe it's Olympia, Wisconsin, as opposed to Superior, Wisconsin. Eventually I'll get it right. Superior, Wisconsin. But when you're Joe Biden and you go and say, hey, this Russia invasion is directly connected to the Republican Party in the United States, you dilute the support that you already had and the unity to some extent, because then you start arguing over why this is occurring as opposed to trying to combat it, which directly dilutes and destroys the unanimity of opinion as it pertains to Russia invading Ukraine. Just another failure of Joe Biden when it comes to trying to draw everybody together.
I just throw this out there too, Clay. We didn't even go a day between the State of the Union. We didn't go a full 24 hours before the sentiment was, why don't you guys back Biden up in his righteous pushback against Vladimir Putin, which we are actually backing up.
Everybody is.
That. Everybody is. But why aren't you backing him up to, well, actually, the insurrection caused this.
Yes.
It's your fault. They didn't wait very long with that pseudo-unity message.
We started off the show talking about the lie from Joe Biden when he falsely said that 5 cops died, but also arguing that Putin's actions were inspired by January 6th. Well, now he's also saying no one has ever lowered the federal deficit as much as he has. But remember, this is totally false because Bill Clinton, remember, balanced the budget, also ran budget surpluses. Let's listen to cut 17.
There's a lot more to my plan to lower costs and lower the deficit. By the way, we're going to lower the deficit by $1 trillion this year. These guys talk about how they always are worried about us spending. We're lowering the deficit. No one's ever done that.
Yeah, Bill Clinton balanced the budget, Buck. You remember, and it used to be, I don't know if it still exists, they had the billboard with the national debt in New York City that was constantly going up to show you what your share of the national debt was. Clinton balanced the budget, but this is also budget artifice because the budget got blown up by the COVID spending, which is not actually in any way representative.